Well, the Cowboys got busy. They added 2 defensive linemen over the weekend, but there might be one more move that they have to make at this very position. We'll get into that tonight on the show, and we'll also talk some Cowboys Raiders, what to watch on Saturday night when the Cowboys play Las Vegas. Let's get to it. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central, and catching up with you in between these shows, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Welcome, everyone, into the show. As I said, man, on the intro, the Cowboys got busy. The Cowboys went out there and they made some moves, which is not unlike what they've done in the past, where they have some roster holes in August and they will try to go out there, try to make something out of nothing and fill some roster holes right before the season starts. Now, these are not superstars that the Cowboys are adding, and that's still okay. I kind of feel like there are a lot of criticisms that we could have for this front office, but ultimately, I feel better about the Cowboys today than I did yesterday just because of these moves. So these are important moves that we're going to be talking about. And I'll also explain why I believe the Cowboys still have one more move to make at that very same position group. Because I'm not entirely comfortable with one situation going on with the defensive line. But yep, I think that they upgraded after these moves that happened in the last 24 hours or so. I agree with what Dustin is saying in the chat. These are nice signings. These were nice additions from Dallas. And let's start with the first one. They went out there, they traded for a nose tackle, and they got Jordan Phillips on the room. Now, a lot of people will ask, wait a minute, that is kind of weird, because why would the Giants go out there and sign Jordan Phillips and not have him play down for them before they traded him for absolutely nothing? And we'll get into the details of that trade. It was a little bit crazy. I don't recall seeing a similar trade. I'll get into why in a moment. But main thing here is it was basically a free move. So it's almost like the Cowboys are signing Jordan Phillips for nothing, honestly, for no trade compensation at all. But again, I'll get into the details in a bit here. First, I want to talk about the actual player and where he fits into the Cowboys defensive tackle room. And why did the Giants parted ways with him in the first place? At the end of the day, the Giants are not a better team than the Cowboys, right? But they do have a better defensive tackle room, arguably, or at least deeper. Forget about better for now, because then you would have to factor in, Oza and Demasi and what they have. They might have us beat at defensive tackle, I'm not going to lie. But the point here is they are deeper. And they have this guy specifically, I think the name is Cardman or Chatman, that apparently has been turning heads in practice for New York. So they were like, man, does Jordan Phillips actually fit into our roster at this point, right? And I know they traded away Leonard Williams, but they still have Dexter Lawrence in there. So it was a weird situation for New York. And they were like, man, if we're going to cut Jordan Phillips, why not get something in return? Potentially. Because there's a clause in that trade where the trade might not actually happen at all, the compensation side of it, at least. So anyways, Jordan Phillips gets to Dallas, and he goes from potentially being number 3, number 4 on the Giants' nose tackle depth chart, number 2 even, number 3 or number 4, excuse me, to going number 2 in Dallas. Because that's what Jordan Phillips is the moment he walks into that door, right? The moment he walks into the Cowboys building, he is nose tackle number 2. Because a lot of people have been asking, is this a move that tells us anything about how they feel about Mazi Smith? And some people have speculated that maybe they're a bit down on the second-year player. I don't believe any of that. I don't think this is a Mazi Smith-related move. I think they're betting on Mazi. I think they're excited and encouraged by what they're seeing from him. I think they still want him to add weight because that's what Mike McCarthy has essentially told us, and that's going to be an important step for him. And then once he gets there, he needs to keep that weight and maintain it throughout the entire season. But that is their guy. They are betting on Mazi Smith 100%. But you need depth. And the players that you had to back up Mazi Smith, where Carl Davis, who is a career backup who didn't show you a whole lot in the preseason opener, he was waived, by the way. This was a corresponding move to Jordan Phillips. The Cowboys still need to make one more move, by the way. Justin Rogers, a 7th-round draft pick, right? 7th-round draft pick doesn't equal year one contributor. As simple as that. So to have this idea that Justin Rogers was going to be number 2 to Mazi Smith was always widely optimistic because he's a 7th-round draft pick. And then there's the undrafted Denzel Daxon, who has this international designation as well, and they might just stash him on the practice squad. He won't count towards the player limit, and they likely will just have him there in case of an emergency. They can call him up. They can do all that from the practice squad. They adjusted the rules, so now they can do that. But again, an undrafted rookie was never going to be that guy, right? That number 2 guy to keep Mazi Smith fresh, which is what Jordan Phillips is likely going to enter the picture for. Now, Jordan Phillips, you watch him play, and it's not always pretty. It's not always pretty. He's got a lot of flaws, but he's a big-sized guy. He's 341 pounds, 6'6", bigger than Mazi Smith in that sense. So you're going to have somebody that will just come in, do his thing, and not really put up numbers necessarily, but just going to be a nice number 2 at nose tackle where he needs to eat up space. He needs to do what he does, right? So I like the Jordan Phillips addition. Now, let's get into the trade details very quickly here. The Cowboys and the Giants are swapping a 6th-round draft pick and a 7th-round draft pick, with the 6th going the Giants' way, obviously, because they're upgrading that draft position. 2 notes, though. These are 2026 draft picks that we're talking about. So this ain't even next year. This is 2 years from now. And additionally, the trade doesn't go through unless Jordan Phillips is on the Cowboys roster for at least 2 games. And that is crazy. Let me confirm that I got the details right on that, because this was a Mike Garofalo tweet from NFL Network. Yeah, so here we go. The pick swap is conditional, and usually what this means when they say conditional, usually the condition is something like, if he plays 70% of the snaps, it is a 5th-round pick, and if not, it's a 6th-round pick, right? Things of that nature. But in this case, the condition is, if Jordan Phillips is on the Cowboys roster for 2 games this season, the deal goes through. If not, the trade is off. That was pretty surprising to me. I do wonder why the Cowboys would want that condition in there. Like, is there any questions about his health? What exactly was going on there? That or just simply if he was bad in camp and the Cowboys decided that they would rather go with Justin Rogers. Or maybe the Cowboys were like, hey, we kind of like what we've got in Justin Rogers. We're not sure if we want this trade. And maybe the Giants were like, you know what? Here's an idea, right? I'm not entirely sure what that condition is about, but it certainly is unique. I don't remember a trade recently in the NFL that had such details. Now, if someone does remember something like that in the comments, please go ahead, because I don't. And I wonder if this is something that becomes more common in the NFL, especially this time of the year, right? I wouldn't see these making any sort of sense at any other time of the year. I think these make sense when teams are already, coaches will tell you that they're not thinking about the 53-man roster, but come on. They gotta, it has to cross their minds right before going to sleep, or when they're showering in the AM or driving to the office. It has to come through their minds. But anyways, teams are thinking of that 53-man roster, and maybe they're like, I think this guy is going to be cut. Let's make some calls around the league. Let's see who takes him, and let's offer this. Let's offer them this, right? Let's offer them this cannot lose type condition on the trade. So, yeah, man, I think that's more or less how it will go. Now, we already knew that the Cowboys needed nose tackle help. Where this gets really interesting is when we get to the defensive ends and when later we get into the 3 techniques. But first, let me say hi in the chat, because I haven't said hi. Where are my manners? Welcome, everyone, into the show. Do me a favor, and as Katharina says right here, if you're enjoying the content, hit the like button. It takes about half a second to hit the thumbs up. Mitchers Adams says Jordan Phillips is better than Hankins. Boom. That's a statement. That's a statement because, I kind of I have not gotten over the whole Jonathan Hankins thing. If Jordan Phillips can come in, can be better. But yeah, I think that's a good comp. I think they're somewhere in that area, right? Jonathan Hankins and Jordan Phillips are likely somewhere in that area. We've got here good solid signings from Black Nat Geo. Rich Coleman says we are stacking our defensive tackle room. He also says their trash is our treasure. Man, we'll take it, right? We will definitely take it. So I get where you're coming from, Rich. I know what you mean right there. Speaking of, for some reason, Carl Lawson kind of became this NFL trash, at least in the free agency world, for some weird reason. And I say that because I think since the moment he was drafted in the second round in 2017 by the Bengals, we all thought of him like a steal because a lot of people liked Carl Lawson. And it feels like within Cowboys Nation, he always had this fan base, right? A lot of people in Cowboys Nation liked Carl Lawson. No one liked him more than John Owning, though. And shout out to John Owning because he is awesome when it comes to breaking down the nitty-gritty of Cowboys football, right? With this, this guy analyzes in depth even the smallest details of a practice clip. You got to look up to him, at least if you're like me and you want to learn more about that. Carl Lawson was like the whale for right in Moby Dick for John Owning. Like he always wanted Carl Lawson on the Cowboys. Now he's got it. You're talking about a productive defensive end. Didn't do much in 2023, but didn't do much, maybe a little bit because of health and also because the Jets were objectively stacked at defensive end. Like there were so many good defensive ends on that roster. In terms of depth, maybe they were missing that superstar, and maybe that's why they went ahead and they got Hassan Reddick via trade. And by the way, they're dealing with some drama off of that. But Hassan Reddick joins a very deep defensive end room. And Carl Lawson now has a chance to go back to his 2022 days where he was actually playing and he was actually producing. Now, Carl Lawson's reason to be this kind of like a castaway in NFL free agency all the time was the simple fact that he cannot stay healthy, right? Or at least historically, he hasn't been able to do that. But when he's out there on the field, this guy is somebody that could start, right? Like this is a starter caliber play that you're going to get out of Carl Lawson at defensive end. The only problem is how long are you going to get it for? Now, the good luck for the Cowboys, or fortunately for the Cowboys, he might fit in as defensive end number 4 if you count Micah as an end. Because you've got Micah and you've got Lawrence, and even Marshawn Nealon can get the big chunk of the snaps here, and then Carl Lawson be number 4. And now that's a deep group of defensive ends. Like, I'm happy with that defensive end group. I felt like they were missing somebody quite urgently, but now Carl Lawson changes that picture for me. Now, the Cowboys did flirt with Carl Lawson a little bit earlier in camp before they signed Al-Quadin Muhammad and before they signed Shaka Toney, who, by the way, is now out for the Cowboys as well. So he's not going to be on the roster. I don't know why they went with them first instead of with Carl Lawson. Chances are because of Lawson's stay in the NFL, he's expensive, right? More expensive at least than these other guys that the Cowboys were looking at. But man, I do love that the Cowboys got Carl Lawson. Makes you feel much better about the defensive end room. There's got to be some level of concern about his durability. But again, if he's in here to be defensive end number 4, got to be happy about it. Before we move on, though, and before we get into like a little bit more of a interesting angle here at the defensive line, I do want to read this stat that actually John Owning had out there about Carl Lawson, and that was in every season, and this is via his Twitter account, in every season that he's played at least 300 pass rush snaps, Carl Lawson has recorded at least 50 pressures and better than a 14.5 pass rush win rate. Those are high numbers for Carl Lawson, right? And Cortez says Carl Lawson on one side, Parsons on the other, or it can be Parsons and D-Law, or it can be D-Law and Nyland, Parsons and Nyland. Now you get into this Armstrong Fowler type conversation where there's always going to be a quality defensive end on the field, it seems to me. And that part is obviously very exciting. Now, this does muddy the picture a little bit for the younger guys. And I'm thinking about Viliami Fehoko, and I'm thinking about Chauncey Golston specifically. Now, these two dudes are interesting because they might be fighting for the same roster spot right now. And it's always tough to know how to count Micah in these roster projections. But the way that I do it, so I've got an edge rusher group, and I've got Micah in there. So I kind of feel like the locks right now are Micah, Lawrence, Nyland, and Lawson. And you might carry 6 of these guys, but you also might carry 5 only. And if you're just carrying 5, I think it's Fehoko in the running, Muhammad on the running, and also Chauncey Golston on the running. I would lean towards one of the younger guys if it was just 5, or in-house projects, not only young, because Al-Qadim Muhammad is not old or anything like that. So I would lean towards Golston and Fehoko if it's just one spot. If it's 2 spots, though, I could see Muhammad sneaking into the team one way or another. But the problem here for me is that Golston and Fehoko are in this conversation because they're not doing great on the inside. Now, mind you, I'm not only talking about the fact that we saw it with our own eyes in the preseason opener against the Rams. I'm talking about the fact that Mike Zimmer straight up told us in a press conference, Golston and Fehoko are going to get more play outside because they didn't do great at defensive tackle. And you can see the plays for yourself. Fehoko, a lot of the times, was being pushed around. Golston was looking better when he was on the outside. The same goes for the practice clips that we've seen so far. So it's kind of like a weird situation where, okay, so now you move them back to defensive end, and they're going to battle it out for one of the last roster spots on the team. But now we get back to the defensive tackles, and you tell me who is going to back up Ozo Odighizuwa. Because there is not a name on that 90-man roster, 91 technically, with Denzel Daxon being an international player. There's not a name on that roster that I can see playing 3-tech. Let me read you the entirety of the Cowboys defensive tackle room, excluding Fehoko and Golston, because the Cowboys have told us that they don't see them as tackles anymore. You've got, ladies and gentlemen, let me move this away here from the screen. You've got Oza, obviously, 3 technique. Massey Smith, obviously, nose tackle. After that, there's Jordan Phillips, also a nose tackle. Justin Rogers, also a nose tackle. Denzel Daxon, also a nose tackle. And then there's Alfred Huggins. Now, you might be like, Alfred Huggins could technically be a 3 technique. I kind of agree. But also, he played terrible in the preseason opener, and he egregiously knocked down a Rams staffer that was not suited up or anything like that. And to eliminate any shadow of a doubt that it was all a huge accident, turn around, flip them off, because that's the way that Huggins does it, right? It was a crazy sequence. Kind of feel like that pretty much got him cut on the spot. I mean, not that it has happened or anything like that. Mike McCarthy did talk to the media about this, and he was like, we're not in agreement with any of that. He apologized. We're happy with the apology, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what that means for Huggins' roster chances, but they're not great, right? They're not great because he didn't play great. He didn't behave good. Forget about great. He didn't behave properly in that practice. I'm surprised that didn't turn into a huge-ass battle on the field, a huge skirmish from players. I'm betting that Huggins is going to leave this team pretty soon. So there's not a 3 technique on this roster that the Cowboys can bet on. And I feel like they absolutely need to address this. Because Oza is pretty good, pretty damn good, but the plan cannot be, let's have Ozo Odighizuwa play 90% of the snaps. And the only time that he's going to get some rest is when we run a NASCAR front of some sort with 4 defensive ends in there instead of just 2 or 3, blah, blah, blah. The Cowboys need a plan to have a backup 3 technique, the way that I see it. I don't view this defensive tackle room as viable for the season still. Because the 2 dudes that might have made you feel uncomfortable, but that you could have been like, well, there are the 3 techniques. It would have been Chauncey Golson, it would have been Viliami Fehoko, right? And maybe, again, we wouldn't feel great about that, but they would be the guys. And right now, there is not a guy on this list that I can look at and be like, well, he could be the backup to Oza. So the Cowboys made 2 defensive line moves. Don't be surprised if a 3rd one is waiting for us in the near future. We'll see if that materializes into something or nothing, but that's how I feel about the defensive line room. Long story short, though, good additions, Carl Lawson, Jordan Phillips. Good to know. Good to know. Ladies and gentlemen, moving on a little bit here, though, on the show. Cowboys are going to play the Raiders very late on Saturday night. It's going to be at 9 p.m. Central. I'm going to be quite honest with you. I might have to watch the replay for that game, right? But it's going to be a fun one, Cowboys, Raiders. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what to watch, but I'll open it up to the chat actually right here. What should we be watching out for in preseason game number 2, Cowboys versus Raiders? Tell me what you will be watching out for, because I've got a list here that I'm going to go through, but I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to go with the basic answer first, right? This is going to be the most basic answers. I got to watch Deuce Vaughn on that field. Man, Deuce Vaughn was not able to play week 1 of the preseason with a hamstring injury, missed a good chunk of training camp, by the way, and it surely felt like he was dropping on that depth chart. The good news for Deuce Vaughn is that no one seems to be taking advantage of it, right? Vaughn was out with injury for over a week of camp. Same for Royce Freeman. Didn't they get hurt like in the same practice? And it didn't feel like Malik Davis started making the lives of coaches more difficult. The same goes for Snip Connor. The same goes for Nathan Pitt, the undrafted rookie. That door is still wide open for running back number 4, if you're including Hunter Lipke as a running back, right? Running back / fullback at 3. So I would look at it, Zeke Elliott, Rico Dowdle, Hunter Lipke as fullback, and still a forward spot there. Now, I've talked about Mike McCarthy going out there and praising Royce Freeman's pass protection, Royce Freeman's special teams value, talking about how he could be a primary player for them in that area. While honestly, Deuce Vaughn is quite limited to... No, it's on Saturday, Katharina. Yeah, it's going to be Saturday night, 9 p.m. Central, if I remember correctly, because it's my 8 p.m. So that game is going to be at 10 p.m. Eastern time. And the game is in Las Vegas. What time is Las Vegas? Is Las Vegas in Mountain Time, or what the heck is this about? Why is it at 9 p.m. Central? Anyways, but what I was saying was Vaughn is in this spot where he's definitely the underdog in this battle, it seems to me. Because if Vaughn provides some special teams value, it is as a kick returner, but nothing else, right? Like the second guy for... Wow, Alex. Alex says it's Pacific time. Oh, wow. Man, I didn't know that. Okay, so that makes sense, I guess, right? But anyways, so I'm on Mountain Time. They're on Pacific time. All right, that makes a whole lot more sense now. Okay, thank you to the chat. Always in point with the answers. Thank you for that. Love you guys. Anyways, Deuce Vaughn on that field is his biggest chance at turning this whole thing around and making his presence felt. He's been getting a lot of chances in practice, it seems like. Patrick Walker from DallasCowboys.com was reporting that Deuce Vaughn got work today with the 1s, with the 2s, with the 3s. So the Cowboys are getting him looks. And I don't see that as a negative. I see that as a big positive. They might be wanting to figure out once and for all, what does he have? But they also might be like, this competition is wide open. Go out there and make something out of nothing. Now, Deuce particularly, I think more than any other of the running backs, is likelier to thrive in a game day scenario than in practice, just because he's so difficult to tackle and so unique in his playing style, where there's a lot of plays in practice that might look like the play is busted, but Deuce Vaughn seems to me like he can turn these things around with his size, with his low center of gravity and all that. I want to see Deuce Vaughn. I think that's my biggest preseason to watch item on my list. But also I want to see Royce Freeman. There's been a lot of buzz around Royce Freeman, how he's looked so far in training camp. Let's see if it's legit. Let's see him in pass pro situations, which is specifically what Mike McCarthy has praised out of the veteran that recently joined the Cowboys. And he gets this chance to really avoid Ronald Jones type fate, a veteran free agent that signed last year and then never got to see the field with the Cowboys. Let's see some of your comments, though, in the chat. What are you guys looking forward to seeing? Cam says Fehoko needs some speed. We'll see. Fehoko is going to have a big game on Saturday night because of what we just talked about. Him and Goldston might be fighting to impress the Cowboys coaching staff and secure their spots. Isidro says the screens might be effective with Deuce. And that's another part of it. Like, how are they going to use Deuce when he's out there on that field in the preseason? Because they might run screens with him. They might want to use his hands as a receiver. They might also run these empty sets, which they're clearly unafraid to do after doing so against the Rams. And they might also get him in some pass pro looks like that viral practice clip of Tyler Guyton doing, taking the defensive end for a ride, pancaking him. But he does so with the help of Deuce Vaughn, who just chips Jared Verse very quickly, and then Tyler Guyton finishes him, takes him to the ground, and it's game over. Now, something else on my list, Flournoy. I want to see Royce. I want to see Ryan Flournoy, and if he bounces back from that first performance or not. Because Ryan Flournoy did not have a good preseason opener. He's been looking good at practice, according to many people, but he did miss the start of training camp, so he was playing catch-up from the start in Oxnard. And then he's off to a bad start in the preseason. Jalen Cropper, in the meantime, has his stock rising and rising. It seems to me like the Tyron Billy Johnson hype has been dying a little bit, but it's been replaced with the Jalen Cropper stuff. And Cropper right now, if you put together a 53-man roster, chances are Cropper's name is in it and Flournoy is not in it. Now, can he bounce back? Saturday is going to be huge for him. Had 2 drops last weekend, a fumble. You don't want to see any of that. You want to see Ryan Flournoy give you a spark, give you something, and maybe something on special teams as well. So Ryan Flournoy bouncing back is a big storyline for me. I want to see what linebacker stands out of the bottom of the depth chart guys. We know about Obershone. We know about Clark. We know about Marist even. Who can be that 5th linebacker for you? Because Willie Harvey Jr. did not have a good game against the Rams. He was the worst graded by PFF among Cowboys defenders. You watch the tape. I think it matches what you see. There were at least 2 plays, I believe, where he just abandons the gap that he is responsible for, and that includes one that is a huge gain for the Rams. Cannot have that for a second preseason game, but also that door is wide open to me after that preseason opener versus the Rams. So can Buddy Johnson make some noise? And it seems like Buddy Johnson has had a good camp and had a good game against the Rams. Could it be Brock making a statement and being like, hey, I've got something? Or it could be a super underdog on that team that we don't talk about, like, say, recently signed Nick Vigil. I want to see if a linebacker stands out of this game, because I think that 5th spot at linebacker is wide open for somebody to win it. And this is a big one. This is a big one, especially because of your rival. What cornerback, again, out of those bottom of the depth chart guys, stands out? This is a game where the Rams head coach went out there and literally said, after that preseason game against the Cowboys, we are going to name our starter. Right? So you've got Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, who are not Pro Bowlers. They're not all pro quarterbacks. No one is saying that. But one of they could both be starting for their team. They're fighting for QB1 in Las Vegas. Now that might make you go, oh man, poor Raiders fans. And yeah, you've got a point. But these are going to be two quarterbacks that are likely going to be dropping back a lot. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot. They're going to be competing for the starting role. These corners are going to be challenged. And as somebody said here, let's see, man. Mark says, I just saw that the Raiders are playing their starters a lot. And I think that's because they want to give both quarterbacks a fair chance at this. You might have 4 quarters of relatively good quarterback play in Las Vegas this Saturday night. So does Eric Scott Jr. bounce back from a game where he clearly struggled? Had that pick that made up for a lot of mistakes maybe, but he still allowed 4 targets in 4 receptions in 4 targets, still had that horrible missed tackle, had that late hit penalty. Can he bounce back from that? At the same time, can Andrew Booth, the newcomer, in place of Nashawn Wright, can he do something to impress? Can Josh Butler do something to be like, hey, I'm right here? Kalen Carson, as OG is saying here, he says Carson got to light it up against the Raiders. I agree with OG. Carson is likely not fighting for a spot. I mean, forget about likely. He's not fighting for a roster spot. So although I agree with OG and I'm excited about watching Kalen Carson do his thing, I also know there's more at stake with the other guys, and that's what I'm more enticed by. Isidro says our cornerbacks are going to eat. That is going to be a huge story of this game, man. Does a cornerback stand out from the pack enough to, honestly, pretty much secure a spot on the roster, right? Like, that's the kind of thing that could happen if one of these guys goes out there and he lights it up. TC says Lance is available. How about a 4th-rounder Raiders? I don't think the Raiders would be in it just because the Raiders would have done something by now if they were in the market for a quarterback. They likely just want to either tank or see what they've got in Aiden O'Connell. I'm rooting for O'Connell in that battle just because I want to see what he's got. And what I do think is possible, and we did have a video about this, is maybe the Vikings. Maybe the Vikings might be interested in giving the Cowboys a call for Trey Lance. I don't think that's crazy to think, right? They've got Sam Darnold, and that's it. And they're not tanking, so they're kind of somewhere in the middle. They might want to keep things interesting for the fans. And this is a team that already had discussions about Trey Lance last year at the trade deadline. So Vikings and Cowboys, they might be trade partners. If you want to see more of that logic, there's a video in the channel from yesterday in case you want to check that out. But for now, though, that will be it for me tonight here on the show. Preseason is going to be fun, man, against the Raiders. It's going to be a fun game. We might have to stay up late, though, for it. But we are up for the task. And on Sunday night, 8 p.m. Central, we're going to see each other. We're going to break that game down. And there's going to be a lot to discuss. In the meantime, though, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your Friday. And I will see you on Sunday. And we're going to have a Cowboys game to talk about. So let's get it, and bye-bye.